So hello, and welcome to this video. We're going to speak to Jonny Wolfson, who is CTO of Adaptable Tools, and he's going to explain what that is in detail, but I tend to think of Adaptable Tools as a extension on top of AG Grid that makes it much easier for end users to get access to a lot of the features in AG Grid without a lot of development effort. Is that fair? I mean, how would you describe Adaptable Tools?
It's really good. I've actually spent the last 4 years trying to refine our elevator pitch, and you pretty much got it in one. We're a low-code AG Grid add-on. So we take AG Grid, which I've got to say we think is fantastic. We love it. And we try to imagine ourselves as end users saying, what are all the kind of, the cool things we would want to do with AG Grid? And if we're really rushed and we don't have the time to develop it in-house, what would be kind of really nice ways of enhancing what's already a great product. So that's what we do. We take AG Grid and we kind of try to find ways where we can make things kind of better for users, make life easier for users, and really bring out the kind of native power of the core product.
And just before developers switch off, that doesn't mean that you do not make your features accessible to developers, because you have an API as well. So everything that you've added on is programmable and accessible to developers.
Yeah, so what we try to do in Adaptable is we try to think of three audiences. So we try to think of the developers beaving away at design time, and we add lots of cool ways that they can provide custom filters, custom queries, reports, extra destinations, conditional styles, stuff which they would want to provide with the application that hosts Adaptable and AG Grid for first-time use. The second and biggest set of users are the actual end users. So hopefully, as we'll see, during this video, we've got a very rich suite of editing and styling and theming and reporting and all the tools which end users want in a point-and-click GUI-based way to kind of make their lives easier. And third, and perhaps most important in a sense, is we try to think of the runtime non-end user. So that's either more developers or support. And we provide things like an audit log. We provide a very rich programmatic API. So essentially everything which Adaptable offers, you can either do through what we call predefined config to ship with Adaptable, or you can do it through the GUI and the menus, or you can do it through the API. And we try as much as we can to make all three users kind of have everything in sync.
Yep. And so because it's so visual, what we should probably do is go to a demo as fast as possible so people can see it. And we're going to see the new version 11 that you've just released. And if we're lucky, we'll get to see your new updated documentation and website, because you've updated everything.
We've been very busy. So should I share my screen?
Yep. Cool.
So this is, in fact, our new website here. So we do have a new website. We kind of try to explain what Adaptable does and who we work with and everything. And then as you mentioned, we've got new documentation, which we'll look at later. And the idea behind this documentation is it looks at everything that Adaptable does, and as well as describing kind of what it has lots of demos, so you can actually sort of see it in action. You can see the code that was used and all that kind of stuff. And it also kind of has all the different versions, so Adaptable React and Adaptable Angular, Adaptable QR, which is our querying language. And then the other thing which we have, which is what we're going to look at now, is we've started to build what we call recipes. These are not, they mimic real life use cases. So this is the first one here. It's using AG Grid 27. It's built in React using the new AG Grid React UI. This is using Adaptable React. And then the idea behind this is it's really to sort of mimic a workflow application. It takes live GitHub issues from VS Code, from you guys, from React and from Angular. And what it does is, as I say, it tries to imagine what kind of things people would like to do. And as a result of that, it brings out some of the features. I'm sure we'll look at them in more detail, but very quickly, you've got multiple layouts. So Adaptable makes it very easy to sort of set up your columns, either pivoted or grouped or tree view, however you want. We have this dashboard. This dashboard can allow for multiple toolbars. So you can kind of very quickly get access. And then it has things like calculated columns and action columns and free text columns. So it's live data. It's not a real application, but we were very determined to do two things. A, build it in less than a day. So we wanted to make sure that everything you can see here took less than 1 day's coding. And number two, we were very keen just to kind of try to show as much of Adaptable as possible without needing any custom code. So everything we're using here, there are function hooks in Adaptable we're using, but everything just uses the Adaptable API.
Yep, so I can see it's live data because we've got political statements on screen. So we might want to switch to a different project just in case.
Let me stick to you guys here. Yeah, good point. And in fact, and you can obviously see, most importantly, it's AG Grid underneath. So this is AG Grid, this is your Alpine theme. And, you know, everything Adaptable does, we think it extends and it leverages the power of AG Grid. So all the great stuff you guys do, such as, you know, here, these are cell renderers, these are cell renderers. If I wanted to, you know, do charting, obviously I would be able to, because you know, it's all there in AG Grid. So we don't take anything away from AG Grid. We just try to add additional features.
Yeah, it's a really good example of demonstrate, because one of the reasons I like pointing people to Adaptable Tools, even if they don't pick up on Adaptable Tools, is it just demonstrates how configurable and extendable AG Grid is, because this is just a massive extension on top. And you've added huge amounts of user-focused extensions to this.
Yeah, so I'll give you kind of one quick example of sort of one of the things we do. So we were talking before about columns. So when you set up Adaptable, most of what you do is pure AG Grid. You create your AG Grid column definitions, you pass in the row data to your grid options, and then anything which in those columns Adaptable takes with and runs. So for instance, all our filters, we know this is a date column, we might add some extra ones. Here we've got some kind of what we call custom filters, but it's pure AG Grid. But then what we do is we say, right, we can add some extra columns on top. So in this grid here, we've provided 3 kind of what we call special columns. So one's called an action column. This is a column where you just provide a button. You can define how the button looks, what it does, what happens when you click it. This one here sends an alert. So this is called an action column. It's very configurable. You can define where, how it appears. This one here is what we call a free text column. And a free text column is where you might want to add extra data. So this is data that's not stored with the underlying data set, but it allows people to kind of do comments and things like this. And probably the most important is a calculated column. So this one here, days old, is a calculated column. And what that does is it works out the difference between today and the created at column. And these are very, very powerful because you can create additional columns. And then as your AG Grid data changes and as it updates in time, these will also update. And then you can make these as sort of as easy as you want. So for instance, if we wanted very quickly to add a second calculated column, we could, and then we can use our editor. So for instance, we can say, if days old is greater than 10, then type old. Otherwise, we can say, if days old is greater than 5, type recent. Oops, otherwise, type new. It knows it, it creates it, it works out what we're doing. We'll look later at the expression editor, but as you can see, there's hundreds of functions you can use. And now we can give our column a name. So we can call this column age. It knows it's a string. It's got other properties. And then that's our column. It now exists in our data set. If I go into the AG Grid editor, there's my age. And you know, I can kind of put it where I want. And you can see old, new, recent. So it's, as I say, that's kind of exactly what we do. We take the richness, take the magic of AG Grid, and then we allow people to do things at runtime, which normally can only be done at design time.
Yep, which is massively powerful. And because it's built on AG Grid, not only are you giving them access to these extensions to create custom columns and which are interactive, wherever, you've also got the underlying charts, so they can use it as a select items, pull out the charts, and just everything is there focused for the user now.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. We don't, there's nothing in Adaptable which replaces, or certainly there's nothing in Adaptable which takes away from AG Grid. Everything is just extensions and add-ons. So yeah, the idea is, everyone who uses Adaptable, well, it depends how advanced they are. Some of them are AG Grid experts, some know very little about it, but essentially they've got the richness of both products to hand.
Yep.
And we think the combined combination is the best on the street.
Yep. And you're trying to make it easy to configure through that settings panel that came up, and you can switch the alerts on and off. So just in case anyone is concerned that Adaptable just keeps throwing alerts to people, they can be switched on and off and configured.
Yeah. So every object. So essentially, absolutely, the way Adaptable works is you can set up these objects, as I say, in two ways. You can provide, and this demo is a good example of how you can provide lots of goodies at design time. And then, depending on your entitlements, because one of the things Adaptable also provides is a very rich permissioning model. So provided the user is allowed to create and edit, and each object, not each module and each object has its own permissions, but depending on the permissions, the users can create their own. So yeah, this is the example of the alert. This is an alert that fires up to say if something's assigned to you. We'll create more. If you want, just before here, we created another calculated column. In this example here, we've created some conditional styles. So you can see, for instance, this one here says the row is pink if the state is not closed and using a diff days. You can create as many of these as you want. So you can style, you can create conditional styles to style rows and columns as you want. If it gets too much, as you pointed out, there's nothing stopping you just rendering something inactive. So if I was to render this one inactive, you'll see all those pink ones go. And as soon as I make it active again, they'll come back because everything is live and at design time. So the settings panel is actually a new feature which we've just added to Adaptable 11, which essentially replaces what was a lot of different pop-ups all in one place. So you've got access to any format columns, you've got access here to some custom reports we've created, you've got access essentially to all the functionality, what's happening in Adaptable, what you've created. And we've also given you the ability to provide your own panels. So in this example here, we've just added one called About Demo, which is here, but you can imagine you might want to create your own configuration screens. And the beauty about this is it's all in one place and it all fits into Adaptable state, because one of the other things Adaptable offers out of the box is state management. By default, everything gets stored to local storage, but in the real world, you won't use that. So we provide lots of ways that you can manage that all your settings, all your everything you create, all your configuration gets stored remotely to a location of your choice. And Adaptable takes care of making sure that everything gets persisted and then gets reloaded, and it does all that. And on top of that, it also actually, we won't look at it today, but it also offers something called team sharing. And what that means is if you've got many members of a team and one member of the team, let's say, creates a new alert, you can click a button and then all the colleagues will immediately get hold of that same alert. And in fact, you can have active live team sharing where if one of those colleagues, if she then makes a change, once she says it, all her colleagues gets that latest version. That's all out of the box as part of Adaptable state management.
Yep, and I can see there you've got a GitHub repo selector, so that will be a custom panel as well.
Yeah. So this is a custom panel. This allows us, this is essentially a panel that which we can edit, and this is essentially what's allowing us here to switch between all these different repos. So yeah, and it's a good question. It's a very typical example in a kind of advanced system or even a semi-advanced system. We would expect you essentially to have three building blocks. AG Grid, everything which AG Grid gives you here, the filters and the columns and all this richness. Let's look at menus. This is all AG Grid menu. These are Adaptable menu items. Ditto with the column menu. This is AG Grid. This is Adaptable. So that's essentially everything AG Grid provides you, everything Adaptable provides you, and then typically you would add your own extra things, your own queries, your own custom filters if you need them, or your own panels. And the more advanced the system, the different weightings you have between those three sort of sets of provision.
Yep, it's very cool. So we should try and look at even more of the extra features that are in there. I don't know. Thing is, I don't know where to start because there's so many things on screen.
Yeah, so let me I'll explain very quickly maybe about the dashboard, because this is kind of one of the things which we try is make it very, very easy for people to get access to the things they need. So the way Adaptable works is we have three areas actually now, because we looked at the settings panel, where you can sort of see what's going on. So one is the dashboard, and the way the dashboard works is you have toolbars. So in this sense, we've got a layout, alerts, selector, and an export toolbar, but you can provide different tabs. So this is an editing toolbar, and here you've got a search. And again, you can add your own custom toolbars. We actually also, we'll have time to look at it now, we'll actually also add an adaptable tool panel, which lets you access all adaptable functionality from the sidebar, particularly useful if space is at a premium. So one of the things you can do in Adaptable is, queries. So for instance, we make it very easy for you to do a query. So you say, I just want to see, say where state is open and where days old is greater than 5. Very simple query. You can make these queries as powerful as you want. As I say, you've got a huge amount of functionality. And when we run that query, we get that. And we can see there's now 21 rows out of our 100. We can change it live. So if we make this 50 and run it, it returns nothing. If we make that 10, we get the 4 rows. And whenever you want, you can clear it. Or in fact, if we wanted to, we could even save that, and then we could run it later. We could sort of run the query that we did before. We also have quick search. That if I just very, very quickly want to see anything in the grid which has the word NE, I can do that. If I want to, I can run that as a server, run that as a query. Editing, there's a lot of editing things which you can do in Adaptable. One of the nice things is you can track changes. So for instance, if I lock this and if I assign this here, I can now see the changes I just made. You can see who made the change, when they were made. And this fits actually into a bigger thing called the audit log, which is a much bigger thing where every change in Adaptable can be seen. We also have a lot of reports. So in this example here, we provided out of the box, Adaptable provides you with 5 reports, but we created some custom reports here. So one called My Assigned Issues, issues created by me. You can see that they use queries. And anytime you want, you can run a report. So I can run this report here. I can send it to Excel, and then that will go off, and that will create that report. Or I can, send all data to say CSV, and then that will automatically, you can see that one's just gone down here, and that will run it. We also do scheduling. So if you, sorry, it's gone into my other screen. There we go. That's the report we just ran. We can also schedule reports. So it's very easy for you to say, I want to create a report called end of day. You can define the columns, you can define the query, and you can say that will run, say, every day at 5 o'clock.
And I saw in the docs, because you just showed the Excel expert there, that you allow back propagation from Excel into Adaptable.
We do, yeah. So when you export to Excel, out of the box, it's just one way. So it's just from Adaptable into Excel. We work with, Adaptable has plugins. So essentially, the core functionality, we try to keep to a minimum. And then we work with a number of partners. If you work with either iPushPull or OpenFin or Glue, essentially when you export data from Adaptable to Excel, as Adaptable ticks, Excel will update in real time. And when you then update Excel, you can update it back into Adaptable. But in fact, you can go further, because one of the nice things Adaptable allows you to do is, for instance, create alerts. So actually, while I'm talking, I'll just create a couple of alerts. So you can create very basic alerts. So for instance, you can say, tell me if observation contains the word test. Okay, and you can say, I want that to be a success alert. I want a little notification. And in fact, if it does it, I want to highlight the cell. And in fact, let's go nicer. Let's add another button. Let's make this button undo. And we'll make this a neutral button. Okay, and we will call this undo. So I've created an alert with some behavior, and basically it says, does the observation column contain the word test? And then if I go in here and I type the word test, I get my alert. And if I want to undo it, I can, and it obviously goes back. Now, imagine that was a much more complicated scenario. Let's imagine you said, you know, this column can't change by more than 5 bips or 2%, or it can't change by more than 10, or it can't double, or what have you. When you make that change in Excel, we will stop it. You will get the same validation. So essentially any alerts that you make in Adaptable will go through to Excel. Now, obviously, you can make your alerts more complicated. So if we go back into our alerts, we can do what we call observable or aggregation alerts. Aggregation alerts are when you say, tell me if the total of this is greater than that. So you can say, tell me if all my prices for where the currency is dollar is greater than 5 million. You can do limits analysis and all this kind of stuff. Observable alerts when we watch the data, and you can say, tell me if things have changed or not changed, or changed too much or too little, or whatever. We'll do a very basic one now. So we will say, just tell me. You can see you've got context sensitive support. It tells you what's wanted. So we're going to say, tell me if the observation, tell me if there's essentially if the observation column changes twice in a period of 5 minutes. So it's tell me if any row observation has a counter, has a change counter 2. So essentially tell me if it changes twice in any 5-minute period. Let's make that a warning. Let's do a notification. Let's highlight the cell and let's jump to the cell. So there we are. That's now going to watch that. And then if I go into an observation and I do first, that's fine. But now if I change that row a second time, it bumps the warning. And in fact, also, I get it here as well. It tells you what the warnings are. In fact, it was down there at the bottom, or you can see it there. So you can do very, very powerful alerting. And that, as you say, Alan, that fits into also any data that you're sending to Excel. So those two can stay in sync with up to the minute validation.
Yeah, so I like the way you said you keep the feature set low and only add the most important minimum stuff that is necessary, because this doesn't look like the minimum feature set.
It's hard to know what the minimum feature, and it's really funny because we always talk about our 80-20 rule, and every one of our different clients has a different 80-20, so it's actually really impossible to know what our 80 is. I guess, as a rule of thumb, pretty much everybody uses layouts. These are very, very common. Most people use reports. Most people use conditional styles. But then, every client has one feature which, they absolutely must have. So, yeah.
Yep. And so you showed adding data into columns for custom columns, and you can have custom formats that are created by the users as well.
So any column at all, you can, again, I'm showing you at runtime, but you can do all this either at design time through config or through the API. So you can change the look and feel of pretty much any column. So for instance, let's do it this way. So we will go, in fact, we've already got some format columns here. In fact, what I will do is I'll turn these off so that you can kind of see the new ones. So for instance, one of the things you can say is we will make every date column have a particular style. You can either give it kind of colors and stuff like that, or you can give it a format. So we will say they're all going to kind of have this format here. And they will all align to the right. And then there we are. You can see they've all taken that. Or you can do particular columns. So let's say take this days old. We can say, let's get the days old column. First of all, let's give it a back color. Now, the format column is different to conditional style because format column always changes it. So we're always going to make this column, for whatever reason, to be white on brown. But it's going to have a format of, say, the word days as a suffix, and it's always going to have 3 integer digits. And then when I finish that, you can see that's the column down here, down this side. And you can then, when you create these, you can also do more complicated ones, actually. So let's take a number column. Let's take the ID column. Actually, that's not a good example. Let's take days. Actually, that's what we'll do. Let's undo that days old for the moment. Because you can also do kind of prettier formats as well. So let's go back into days old. And this time we can do styles, or we can do, say, gradient or percent bars. So here we're going to say, if it's between 0 and 3, let's make it red. Otherwise, if it's between 3 and 6, let's make it orange. Or otherwise, if it's between 6 and 12, let's make it green. Let's show the cell value. You don't want a back color. And then it will then create that, and then you'll be able to then see that kind of also as a format column as well. And yeah, you can do all those kind of things. So you can kind of create very powerful format columns, percent bars, gradient columns. You can kind of see it probably better. That it's easier to see better in our docs. So if you go into our docs, we've got an example here. Once it loads, it takes a bit of time for the data to load, where we've got kind of multiple, where we've shown gradient columns and percent bars and stuff like that. So in this example here, we've got kind of, we've got a gradient column, we've got percent bars, we've added stuff. And that's the idea, really, behind Adaptable, that users can style things as well if they want.
Yeah, I feel I'm about to do someone like on a shopping channel, and it's like, and that's not all, because users can also create their own grids through JSON or reading it from Excel or.
Yes, they can. We have a no-code version, and in the no-code, so we talked about the plugins. So one of the plugins we do is a no-code plugin, and the beauty of that plugin is that you can drag and drop any Excel file or any JSON file. Adaptable will read it, it will work out what your column definitions are, and it will create the grid on the fly, and then everything you want to do in Adaptable will automatically work. Yeah. So that's used, that's not really used often as a main grid, but it's often used, if people want to see reference data or live data or market data, it's very good because you can change it. But everything we've looked at here, like all the format columns and all the alerts, they all work. They all work out of the box on the no-code version as well.
Yep. We could probably be here for hours just exploring all the features that are in here, because we haven't covered bulk edits, all the different ways that you can edit the information, all the different editors and filters you got. This is enormous. It presents so much to the user out the box. So the dev team don't have to create any of this.
Yeah, that's the idea. We tried, so we've been around, for 4 years now. So for the first 2 years, it was really about us, sort of doing the basic stuff, the conditional styling, the formatting, the custom columns. But since then, over the last, sort of 2 years, it's really been about adding all these extra features, some of the more powerful alerts. And we do, we say to people kind of, what are your pain points? Where are you spending lots of development time? And we will try and do that. So, we talked about our API. So if you go to our reference, you can see in our reference, we have all these API sections, and each of these, will have hundreds and hundreds of columns. So if I just want to pick one at, I don't know, let's just pick layout. So if you can look at our layout API, we have all these functions that allow you to manage layouts programmatically. And it's the same with pretty much everything in our in what we do. Custom, if I want to do custom sorting or everything. So yeah, the idea behind Adaptable is we want to think of everything that you might want to do, and we want to give it to you in a way. And also, what we then do is, we like to think we probably know AG Grid as well as anyone outside your core development team. So we know the edge cases, we know particularly if people are moving, let's take, when they're moving from 26 to 27, or if they're moving to the new React, and we're able to advise them on the the pitfalls and the do's and the don'ts, and not just how to get the best out of AG Grid. People come to us and they say, why is this happening? We'll go, maybe, don't use a cell renderer here, you should use a value formatter, or you should do this or do that, or, use some, let's say, the AG Grid virtualization to make sure, you're not rendering all the columns, we only render what's in your viewport. One thing that Adaptable does also is everything, obviously, we're looking at in this demo is using the client-side row model. And we always say to people, if you've got 100,000 rows or less, use the AG Grid client-side row model. It's fantastic. Because of all the stuff you've done on virtualization, it's really, really, really fast. If you are using infinite or server-side row model because you've got hundreds of thousands of rows, everything in Adaptable still works. There's nothing in Adaptable that doesn't work on the server side. It just needs to be configured slightly differently.
That's fantastic. So I don't know where to go next in the demo, because we've probably been doing it for quite a while and we have covered a lot of stuff. I don't think there's any killer features we missed out, because we went through so many of that. Like, people might just be looking at this now and it's like kind of blasé because you've seen so much at once, but there's a lot of stuff there that has been built on top of AG Grid that was like, just the query language would take people ages to create.
Yeah, so this is probably one of our kind of killer features, I guess, is this, because so in this example here, get my username, this is what we call so this is a function which we wrote for this demo. So essentially the expression editor, the adaptable query language, comes with about 60 odd functions, but it's very easy for you as users to define your own for your own application. And then when you define it, it's just there and it's used everywhere. So yes, this editor is incredibly powerful. And the idea behind this is that we want to allow people, our belief is the end users know their data better than everyone else. We just want to give them the tools to leverage that knowledge and to maximize it and to get the most out of their data. And actually, it's a really nice example of how we work with AG Grid, because we build this editor, we build all these functions. But essentially, when I create this query, so as soon as I create this query and I run it, I'm then hooking straight into the AG Grid filtering. I'm hooking into your stuff. You're taking care of that. You're using the change detection. So they're actually getting the best of the AG Grid change detection and the querying. They're getting our editor, our querying language, and they're getting their specialist knowledge that they know what their users want to look for and search for.
Yep, that's fantastic. So we should remind people where they can find you. So it's AdaptableTools.com.
It is. Where are we? Sorry, yeah, it is. It is AdaptableTools.com. I should probably have it down here somewhere. I do. There we are. So yeah, come and find us. And we'll be very happy to give anyone a personal demo and show how we leverage AG Grid. So I think to kind of provide the best of breed and best on the street. So
people go off to Adaptable Tools, explore the demos, which are all interactive, lots of stuff there, dive into the documentation, see all the examples. It saves so much time to build features that businesses actually want when they're working with data. It's excellent.
Thank you.
All right. So is there any last words from you, or is that?
No, get in touch and look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time, Jonny. And that'll be it. Go off to adaptabletools.com.
Cheers, Alan.